Restricted zone. No civilian access. That was the first thing I heard, shouted through a bullhorn that cracked the silence of a foggy Tuesday morning, right as I pulled my beat-up Ford F-150 up to the rusted iron gates of the Blackwood Creek Mill. I remember gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white, feeling the heater vent blowing warm air against my face while the world outside turned into something I didn't recognize. 30 minutes. That's how long I'd officially been the owner of this place. I had the deed sitting on the passenger seat next to a lukewarm cup of gas station coffee, the ink probably still wet from the title company downtown. I was 34 years old, a former structural welder who'd spent the last decade breathing toxic fumes and hanging off oil rigs in the North Sea, saving every dime, eating beans and rice, all for this specific dream. 40 acres of neglected riverside land in rural Oregon, an old abandoned textile mill that I was going to turn into a sustainable aquaponics farm. It was supposed to be my exit strategy, my quiet place where the only noise was the wind in the Douglas firs and the rushing water of the creek. Instead, I was looking down the barrel of an AR-15 held by a man wearing tactical gear that cost more than my truck. The guy looked like he'd been carved out of granite, mid-40s, gray crew cut, no name tag, just a patch on his chest that said Vanguard Defense Group. He walked toward my truck with that specific, heavy-footed confidence that tells you a man is used to giving orders and having them followed without question. Behind him, two other guys were setting up what looked like a signal jammer near the old gatehouse. "Sir," the lead guy said, tapping on my window with a hard knuckle. "You are in a secured extraction zone. Turn your vehicle around immediately." I rolled the window down just enough to slide the manila envelope out. "There's a mistake, buddy. My name is Caleb Thorne. I just bought this property. Signed the papers at 9 a.m. This is my land." He didn't even look at the papers. He looked at me, through me really, like I was a minor inconvenience, like a mosquito he had to swat before he could get back to real work. He pressed a finger to his earpiece. "Command, we have a civilian breach at the North Gate. Claiming ownership. Advise." A static-filled voice crackled back, loud enough for me to hear. "Secure the perimeter, Ricks. No access. Validating documentation is not your priority. Asset protection is." Asset protection? On an abandoned textile mill that had been empty since the 90s? "Look," I said, trying to keep the welder's edge out of my voice. "I don't know who signed your paycheck, but the previous owner, Mr. Henderson, passed away 2 years ago. The estate sold this to me. Legally. So unless you want the sheriff out here, you need to step aside." Ricks leaned in close, and I smelled stale tobacco and gun oil. "Mr. Thorne, let me be crystal clear. The local sheriff has been briefed. This area is under federal environmental remediation jurisdiction managed by Horizon Global Solutions. You call the sheriff, he's going to tell you to go home. You push past this gate, and under the Patriot Act provisions regarding critical infrastructure, I am authorized to detain you. And trust me, you don't want to be detained by us." He stepped back, hand hovering near his sidearm, and gave me a look that wasn't angry, it was bored. That was the scary part. He wasn't threatened by me. He was indifferent. I threw the truck into reverse and backed out, watching them chain my gate shut with a padlock the size of a fist. As I drove away, shaking not from fear but from a rage so hot it felt like heartburn, I realized something. They weren't guarding an empty building. You don't put a 3-man tactical team and signal jammers on a rotting mill unless there's something inside worth killing for. I drove straight back to town, my mind racing. I'd spent 6 months researching this property. I checked the liens, the easements, the flood zones. I walked the perimeter. I talked to the county clerk. There was nothing, absolute zero, about Horizon Global Solutions or Vanguard Defense Group. First call was to my realtor, Sarah. She's a good kid, eager, new to the game. When I told her what happened, she went quiet. "Caleb, that's impossible," she stammered. "The title is clean. I'm looking at the digital abstract right now. There are no leases, no tenants, no government contracts. You own it free and clear." "Well, tell that to the paramilitary squad camping on my front lawn, Sarah," I snapped, then immediately apologized. It wasn't her fault. Who is Horizon Global? I don't know. Let me call the title officer. I parked outside the county library, needing a stable Wi-Fi connection that wasn't my phone, just in case Ricks wasn't lying about the surveillance capabilities. I grabbed a computer in the back corner, the one with the dusty screen, and started digging. Horizon Global Solutions didn't exist 6 months ago. It was a shell company registered in Delaware, pointing to another shell company in Nevada, which pointed to a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands. But the security firm, Vanguard, they were real. Mercenaries for hire. They did pipeline security in unstable countries, corporate extraction protection, union busting. They were heavy hitters. Then I found the anomaly. Buried deep in the county's archived permits, not the active ones, but the pending review pile, was a filing from 3 weeks ago. A subsurface resource assessment filed by a generic legal firm on behalf of the Henderson estate. But Henderson was dead. His kids sold me the land. Who filed a permit in a dead man's name? My phone rang. Unknown caller. I hesitated, then answered. Thorne. Mr. Thorne, a voice said. Smooth, synthetic, almost too calm. This is Director Sterling with Horizon. We understand there was friction at the gate this morning. We apologize. There's been an administrative overlap. Overlap is one word for it, I said, looking around the library, suddenly paranoid that every person reading a newspaper was watching me. Trespassing is another. We'd like to resolve this. Meet us at the Grand Conference Room at the Obsidian Tower in Portland. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. We have a settlement proposal that I think you'll find life-changing. They knew my number. They knew I was digging. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my rental apartment, cleaning my tools, just doing something with my hands to keep from losing my mind. I kept thinking about the asset protection line. What asset? The mill was gutted. The timber was worthless. The next morning, I walked into the Obsidian Tower. It was glass and steel, smelling like money and intimidation. The conference room was on the 40th floor, overlooking the Willamette River. 3 people were waiting. A woman in a suit that cost more than my first house, Miss Sterling. A nervous guy with a laptop who looked like a scientist. And Rix, the commando from the gate, standing in the corner like a statue, wearing a suit that didn't hide the bulge of a shoulder holster. Mr. Thorne, Sterling said, sliding a folder across the mahogany table. Let's cut to the chase. Horizon has identified a unique geological anomaly beneath the Blackwood property. We initiated a study prior to the sale, but the paperwork lagged. We need access for 24 months to complete our extraction. Extraction of what? I asked, not touching the folder. Rare earth mineral suspension in the deep aquifer. The scientist guy squeaked up, then shut his mouth when Sterling shot him a glare. Silica variants used in high-end semiconductor manufacturing. Extremely valuable. Extremely rare. Sterling tapped the folder. We are authorized to offer you a lease agreement. $100,000 a month for 24 months. Plus a $2 million signing bonus. All you have to do is sign a non-interference clause and stay off the property for 2 years. I looked at the check sitting on top of the papers. $2 million. It was everything. It was retirement. It was freedom. It was never welding another pipe in freezing rain again. All I had to do was walk away from a piece of land I'd owned for less than 24 hours. But then I looked at Rix. He was smirking, just a tiny curl of the lip. He knew I was poor. He knew they could buy me. It was the arrogance that got me. The absolute certainty that everything has a price tag. And the environmental impact? I asked. You're pumping from the aquifer that feeds the whole Blackwood Creek Valley. People have wells out there. Farmers. The process is sealed, Sterling said, too quickly. Completely safe. Then why did you need a paramilitary team to guard a safe process? I pushed. And why did you forge a dead man's signature on the permit application? The air left the room. Sterling's smile vanished. Rix shifted his weight, his hand dropping to his side. You're a welder, Mr. Thorne, Sterling said, her voice dropping an octave, losing all the warmth. You fix things. Don't try to break this. This operation is bigger than your moral compass. You have 24 hours to sign. After that, we classify the property as a hazardous zone under federal emergency protocols, and we seize it through eminent domain. You get nothing. And frankly, people who ask too many questions in this industry tend to have very bad luck with workplace accidents. I stood up. I didn't take the folder. I didn't take the check. I think we're done here. I hope you have good life insurance, Caleb, Rick said as I reached the door. I walked out, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I drove straight to a payphone. I wasn't using my cell anymore, and called the one person I knew who understood the land better than anyone. Silas, an old retired hydrologist who lived in a cabin about 10 miles upriver from my mill. I found Silas chopping wood. He was 70, with skin like leather and eyes that had seen too many rivers die. I told him everything. The silica suspension, the guards. He spat on the ground. Silica? Bull. They ain't mining silica, son. That aquifer sits on top of a deposit of heavy lithium salts. If they're pumping that out, they're using acid injection to dissolve the rock. Fracking, basically, but dirtier. If they crack that casing, the acid bleeds into the river. It'll kill everything from here to the coast. The salmon, the farms, the town's drinking water. It'll be a dead zone for 50 years. That was the moment the fear turned into resolve. It wasn't about my property rights anymore. It was about my neighbors. It was about the land itself. I need to prove it, I said. I need to see the equipment. They got sensors everywhere, Silas warned. Thermal, motion. I know structures, I said. That old mill was built in the 20s. It has a turbine intake tunnel that runs from the river, under the foundation, right into the basement. If they didn't weld that grate shut, I can get in. That night, I parked my truck 3 miles away in a dense patch of forest. I dressed in my old diving gear, a dry suit from my rig days, blacked out my face, and slipped into the Blackwood River. The water was glacial, numbing my skin instantly, but the adrenaline kept me warm. I floated downstream, letting the current carry me toward the mill, staying submerged, breathing through a snorkel. I could see the lights of the Vanguard security perimeter. They had spotlights sweeping the grounds, drones buzzing overhead like angry hornets. They were looking for a man on foot. They weren't looking for a piece of driftwood. I found the intake tunnel. It was clogged with algae and rot, smelling of decay. I pulled myself in, inch by inch, fighting the claustrophobia. The rusty iron grate was there, but the bolts were corroded. I used a small pry bar I'd taped to my leg. With a groan of metal that sounded like a gunshot in the echoey tunnel, it gave way. I surfaced in the sub-basement of the mill. The noise hit me first. A low, thrumming vibration that shook the concrete floor. I climbed up a service ladder and peered through a grate into the main floor. It was a factory. A high-tech, illegal chemical plant dropped right into the shell of a rotting barn. Massive stainless steel tanks were hissing. Pipes ran directly into the floor, drilled straight through the foundation into the earth. And there, sitting on a table, were the monitors. I pulled out my waterproof camera. I snapped photos of the acid tanks, labeled hydrofluoric acid, nasty stuff that melts bone. I took pictures of the flow charts showing millions of gallons of contaminated water being pumped back into the ground. I took pictures of the shipping manifests, destination, a shell company in Shanghai, labeled as agricultural runoff. They were stealing millions in lithium, poisoning the water table, and selling it overseas tax-free. Suddenly, a siren blared. A red strobe light started spinning. Sector 4 breach. Sublevel seismic sensor triggered. They had sensors on the floor grates. I was burned. I heard boots thundering on the metal catwalks above. Rick's voice barked over the PA system. Seal the exits. Flush the basement. We have a rat. Flush the basement. I heard the roar of water valves opening. They were going to flood the intake tunnel. My only exit. I scrambled back down the ladder, but the water was already rising, swirling with a chemical sheen. If I went back out the tunnel, I'd be fighting a torrent. I had to go up. I ran toward the old freight elevator shaft. I knew from the blueprints that it had a maintenance ladder that went to the roof. I climbed, my wet gloves slipping on the greasy rungs. Below me, I could hear men shouting, the beam of flashlights cutting the darkness. He's in the shaft, someone yelled. A bullet pinged off the metal rail next to my head, sending sparks flying. I scrambled faster, lungs burning. I reached the roof hatch, kicked it open, and rolled out onto the gravel roof under the night sky. The drones were right there, hovering, their red camera eyes locking onto me. I sprinted for the edge of the roof, the side facing the river. It was a 40-foot drop. Behind me, the roof access door burst open. Rick stepped out, rifle raised. End of the line, welder, he screamed. I didn't hesitate. I jumped. I hit the water hard, the impact knocking the wind out of me, but the dry suit saved me from the shock. I dove deep, letting the current take me, swimming until my muscles screamed, until I washed up on a mud bank a mile downstream. I lay there for 10 minutes, shivering, coughing up river water. But I felt the SD card taped to my chest. I had them. I didn't go home. I knew they'd be waiting. I went to Silas's cabin. We fired up his old satellite internet connection. You send this to the local cops. They bury it, Silas said, pouring me a shot of whiskey. Sheriff plays golf with the guys who hire Vanguard. I know, I said, typing furiously. That's why I'm sending it to everyone else. I uploaded the file package, photos, videos, the forged permit I found online, to the EPA's whistleblower portal, the FBI's Environmental Crimes Division, and 3 major news outlets in Seattle and Portland. Then, I set up a dead man's switch, an automated email blast that would go out to every property owner in the valley in 2 hours. Then, I went back to the mill. You're crazy, Silas said. They'll kill you. They can't, I said. Not when the world is watching. I drove my truck right up to the main gate at dawn. Rix was there, looking tired, looking angry. He had a bandage on his hand. You have a death wish, Thorne, he growled, unholstering his weapon. You're trespassing. I held up my phone. I'm live streaming, Rix. 3,000 people are watching right now. Say hi to the internet. I stepped out of the truck. And you hear that? In the distance, the sound of sirens. Not the local whoop-whoop of the sheriff, but the deep, authoritative rumble of federal SUVs. Black Suburbans, but this time, they had yellow government plates. That's the cavalry, I said. EPA Emergency Response Team. And the FBI. Turns out, the feds take a dim view of unregistered lithium extraction using Class A restricted chemicals. Rix looked at his phone. He must have gotten the call from Sterling. His face went pale. He looked at me, looked at the approaching sirens, and realized his paycheck just bounced. He reholstered his gun, turned to his men, and said, Stand down. We're leaving. You're not going anywhere, I said. The FBI raid was swift. They swarmed the mill like ants. Agents in hazmat suits breached the factory floor. They found the acid, the pumps, the lithium. They found the forged documents in the on-site office. Sterling was arrested at her office in Portland trying to shred documents. Rix was cuffed right there at my gate. As they walked him past me, he stopped. You think you won? He sneered. We're just contractors. The money behind this. You'll never see them. You just made enemies you can't afford. Maybe, I said, leaning against my truck, finally feeling the sun on my face. But today, get off my land. The fallout was massive. The Blackwood scandal dominated the news for months. The cleanup took a year, funded by the seized assets of Horizon Global. The Henderson estate sued. I sued. The neighbors sued. I ended up with a settlement that was substantial. Not the $2 million bribe, but enough to build my farm the right way. But here's the thing. The victory wasn't clean. The water table is damaged. It'll take a decade to fully recover. Some of the chemicals leached out before we stopped them. My neighbors look at me differently now, some with gratitude, but some with suspicion, like I brought the trouble by digging it up. I still live at the mill. I welded the gates open. I run my aquaponics farm, growing lettuce and tilapia. It's quiet mostly, but every time I hear a heavy truck down on the road, or I see a drone buzzing a little too low, my hand goes to the safe where I keep my own insurance policy now. Because Rix was right about one thing. The shell companies dissolved, but the demand for lithium didn't go away. The people who authorized that operation are still out there, sitting in boardrooms, looking at maps, looking for the next quiet place with a deep aquifer and a desperate owner. I saved my land, but I lost my peace of mind. I learned that ownership is an illusion. You only own what you can defend. And in a world where resources are running out, the war is coming to everyone's backyard eventually. So, I've got a question for you folks. If they put a check for $2 million in front of you, life-changing money, and told you to look the other way while they drained your community dry, would you have taken it? Be honest. Because standing in that cold conference room, knowing I could fix my whole life with one signature, it was harder than I want to admit. Let me know what you would have done in the comments. And if you see a security team setting up on an abandoned lot near you, don't assume they're there to protect the property. Start digging. Thanks for listening. Stay vigilant.